time for us to turn our attention to the boxing at the weekend, and despite dislocating his shoulder in the final round, a big win for George Groves. Gareth A. Davies is with us this morning. Good morning to you, Gareth. How are you?
Good.
A lot of criticism of Chris Eubank Jr. in the aftermath of this fight. How merited is the criticism?
You know, look, when you hype yourself up to the point where you say, you know, your father's saying you're a machine, as his father, Chris Eubank Sr. said, that he's as destructive as Mike Tyson, that he doesn't have a team around him that's conventional in boxing. He doesn't have a conventional trainer. He calls himself self-trained. He says he's impervious to pain. And then he goes out and he's schooled technically by George Groves in Manchester. There are repercussions. You know, there's a word called hubris, which we all know well. We've all been there. We've all been the arrogant young man who believes he can do, who feels indestructible. But a time comes when you have to kind of form to convention, Ger. You have to take the mores of a sport that's been around for 150 years. There are reasons that there are cornermen, trainers, camps, teams. And Chris Eubank Jr. got exposed as a man who didn't know how to change the pattern of a fight through boxing ability on Saturday night. And he got beaten up. He was very brave. He was very courageous. He's very tough physically. But he got outmanned and out-old-manned, and he got manhandled by a much better, technically skilled, bigger boxer.
This isn't the hubris of Conor McGregor training for Floyd Mayweather. This is hubris that can be fixed, though, with a coach, right? Because the boxing skills that Chris Eubank has, you know, allied to a proper game plan, could see him be a viable fighter in his weight division.
He's not a super middleweight because his power didn't carry up. George Groves was able to handle him very easily in terms of power. I mean, it was a don't get me wrong, it was a terrifically exciting fight, but it was pretty one-sided. It was terrifically exciting because Eubank Jr. is prepared to put everything on the line. He's naturally a middleweight. Look, there was a lot of money on the line in this WBSS World Boxing Super Series semi-final tournament anyway. You know, that there's £48 million worth of prize money for the two weight divisions involved in it. So, and it's a 16-man tournament. So equal that money out. You know, you're going to be very well paid for 3 fights in 9 months if you're in it. So he was invited into the tournament. He had the IBO title at 12 stone. So you know, and he's a name. He really brought fans to the arena. I mean, that arena sold out in 7 minutes when the fight was announced. So yes, he can progress. I think George Groves, Tony Bellew, Glenn McCrory, I worked with 2 of them on the radio on Saturday night, Glenn McCrory and Tony Bellew. They offered great advice to Chris Eubank Jr. And I saw George Groves with his arm in a sling yesterday morning. George's advice is go to America, get away from your father, go and rebuild quietly now at middleweight. And Glenn McCrory and Tony Bellew both think that he needs to step away from his father as well, step away from Ronnie Davis, create something new, and come back, because he's got all the physicality, he's got all the athleticism, but, you know, he barely threw a jab, and he was kind of out-jabbed for the first 5 rounds of the fight. So, you know, he's been boxing since he was a teenager. It's not like he's inexperienced, but he's inexperienced on the big occasion, and he didn't have a game plan.
Do you buy all those words that were said on the radio the other night, Gareth? Do you buy the fact that his father is this obstacle between him and reaching the next level?
I think it's a very complex question, that, Owen. I think that, you know, I mean, I was talking with George Groves about this yesterday. We were saying that, and not in a mean way at all, but maybe only a psychologist could unravel the relationship between Eubank Jr. and Sr. They have extraordinary charisma, you know. And they genuinely do. When you're around them, they make everything they say is brilliant copy. And, you know, we're all journalists. We know when people make great copy, they get elevated, they get augmented in the media, you know, because they are preening, posing peacocks, the pair of them. And as a result, when things don't go right, you know how cruel the world we live in is. And it's even more cruel today because of social media. I mean, Naseem Hamid on the ITV's broadcast told him to retire now. I mean, you know, and Naz went off. I mean, Naz in a suit was something to behold anyway, to start with. But I've never seen him in a suit. You know, he literally did say that this guy isn't going to improve. He should retire now. He doesn't want to see him get hurt. But you know, the point is, this is what boxing, big boxing, has revolved around for 160 years. Hype and promotion. People forget very quickly that someone has had a bad night. It's built up again. Excuses are found. A new team is made. And people come back. We've seen it a million times. George Groves was here against Carl Froch in 2014. He lost the first fight in Manchester, having dropped Froch in the first round. They came back in after the controversial stoppage in the 9th round. Groves pushed the issue with the IBF, got the rematch. We had 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium with Groves saying, "Look, I told you so. People want it." And what did he do? He got knocked out by a cannonball right hand in the 8th round and had to live with the ignominy for the next year and a half, or 2 years, or 2.5 years, till he won a world title. And he lost another world title in between. It's a tough sport, boxing, at this level. And at the moment, Eubank Jr. is technically not good enough to live at world level.
It doesn't seem like... A couple of things. The style that Eubank Jr. brought to that second half of the fight in particular, with the wild uppercuts and like swinging for the fences, actually made the second half of the fight as exciting as a one-sided fight is going to be, where a more technically proficient boxer just jabs the opposition to death. Like, so I think he deserves a bit of credit for that. He has been absolutely pilloried, and even in commentary, like, "Oh, this fight's over, this is terrible," on the TV. He was getting absolutely hammered, and I was looking at it going, there seems to be something else at play here, that like, if somebody else was fighting with that cut and that blood and this style, he would actually be getting a lot more credit for it. And I wonder if the credit comes in the days and weeks to come when everybody goes, "Actually, I really enjoyed that fight."
Yeah, exactly. You're not wrong, Ger. I mean, there is I can, you know, again, I was working Sunday Telegraph and Monday Telegraph, as well as Talk Sport, you know, building up and pre and post fight. And there was no question that the fight was extraordinarily thrilling and exciting. There's no question about that, because of the kind of physicality, because of the human specimen, the physicality that Eubank brings to anything, you know, and he gave his all in there. There's no question about that. There's no question about his strength, his tenacity, his desire and his will. He's just technically proficient. The problem he had, yes, he did make it an exciting fight. And, you know, people that know boxing, of course, you know, great on TV. He was throwing himself in there. He was forcing Groves into the ropes. They were having a tear up inside, but he wasn't really landing with very much, even though it was exciting. And I do agree with you. He does deserve credit for that. But I think when you make all the pronouncements that you're knocking someone out cold, that you are going to end someone's career, that you're sending them into retirement, it's just that the swing is so huge when that doesn't happen. And, you know, technically, I think Groves won 8 of the 12 rounds. And the last round, he fought with one arm, remember? So, you know, he dislocated his shoulder. So you can discount one. So you say he won 8 of 11. What Eubank did that really shows he needs to change is that he had to lunge in to get close, because he couldn't get round Eubank's jab. And by about the 4th round, his face was showing a man who was getting caught, and he didn't know how to react to it. There wasn't the right advice in the corner. Look, yes, he does deserve some credit for being a very brave man. But the trouble is, if he's a very brave man at this level for 4 or 5 fights, and he gets beaten up like this for 4 or 5. He took a lot of shots from Groves last night, on Saturday night. But the point is, he just needs to improve. I like him. I love being around them. I think as I said, I think they've got terrific charisma. But you know, he'll come back from this. He put out on social media yesterday, he'll be back soon enough. And the funny thing is, if Groves' shoulder isn't right, you never know what's going to happen in this situation. He could come through as the loser and fight in the final if they have to do that.
Yeah, he could well do. That'll be some blow for George Groves. And on George Groves, how much credit can the McGuigans take for his performance on Saturday night? And where is the McGuigans stock at now, post Carl Frampton?
Well, that's a big question. Okay, have we got 25 minutes? Um, yeah, I mean, it's a great look. I mean, there was a lovely moment. There's a great thing at the beginning of the WBSS when the World Boxing Super Series, when both fighters come out in these events. It's a brilliant arena. If anyone hasn't seen it, it is worth buying the broadcast, because generally, of course, we have a square platform around a ring, but it's circular with a circular light show, and both fighters come out and stand on a podium outside the ring, and smoke comes up. It really is like being gladiatorial Rome. And I'm getting to the point here, Owen. And the point is that when Shane and George came out, they posed in the pose that the Eubanks normally do on the stage before the fight. It was absolutely brilliant. They took up that, and they kind of strutted like this, like Eubank Sr. used to do. And Shane, I think, had a great time on Saturday night, because he had clearly meticulously prepared with George. They had really studied Eubank's movement coming in, and they caught him so quickly, so many times with the jab, where that's why he was hurling himself in the end to get in. That's why there were head clashes. Shane had a great game plan. He's a terrific mentor for so many fighters. Barry's in the background. I saw Barry Sunday morning in the Lowry as well, with his wife and Barry's daughter, and all the whole family were there. They will have had an input as well. They don't do things as one, the McGuigans. They do it as a six, I think, generally. So yeah, he takes great credit for that, because Grove stayed mentally and physically on his game plan, which takes a lot of effort over 36 minutes. And as I say, especially with the last 2 minutes with your left shoulder hanging out, because Grove said he tried to throw it at one point and realised that he couldn't even lift the arm. And with the Frampton situation, oh God, I mean, I find it gutting. I did bring it up with Barry on Sunday morning, had a quick chat with him about it. I mean, nothing on record, but just to say that I'm so sorry, because Carl Frampton was like his fourth son at one time, and those two were so close. I don't know what to say about it. I'm just so desperately disappointed that these relationships go south in boxing and end up in court, I
guess from Shane McGuigan's point of view, the main thing is that he isn't just now wedded in the popular consciousness and in the wider boxing public with a single fighter. He's done it twice. And you do it once, everybody goes, okay, great, but maybe that guy was preternaturally gifted and all you were doing was not getting in his way. With this, it's like, hang on a second, we've masterminded this. And, even if he's picked the right guy, that's a talent in itself. Yeah,
but also, look, I mean, I think it's incredible with Shane, because, I think, isn't he a year younger than Carl anyway, from memory? I think he's a year younger. I mean, it was an extraordinary relationship anyway. Shane's a very young trainer. He's going to be around for 20, 30 years doing this. He's so talented. He's so bright. He's so articulate to speak to. He's a very clever kid. I mean, I just call him a kid, I mean, I'm the same age as Barry, but, and he is. He's a clever kid. And, David Hay likes working with him. People speak highly of Shane. He's always measured. He's very, very intelligent to talk to, and he will only get better and better. Carl was his first major student, and I see Carl as so interred with the McGuigans. I still find it hard that they've split. But listen, Carl's a terrific fighter. I can't wait for Nonito Donaire. That's going to be, oh my God, that's going to be off the charts. Talk about claret. There'll be claret that night, I tell you.
One last thing, the actual prize money I didn't realise was as big as you said it was for the two weight divisions. Part of me feels like this might actually be the future for boxing, where we do put enough money on the table for fighters to risk losing, and ultimately, there's been a big debate about the future of the UFC and how bound up they are with the single individual talent, given how many of their superstars have fallen by the wayside or been popped for drugs recently. It was a really good piece that we did last week with Bryn Jonathan Butler about this, and you can see that boxing is responding a little bit to UFC by trying to put its best fighters together, and they're actually paying the fighters enough money to make it worth their while.
Look, I mean, there's three. I think there's three weight divisions, and I mean, we've seen an incredible cruiserweight division in this tournament for a start. We got a final with Murat Gassiev and Alexander Usyk. What are you passing little notes for there, Owen? And Alexander Usyk in the final of this tournament, this cruiserweight tournament, we've seen people didn't know who the cruiserweights were before this event, so it's fantastic now. So is the super middleweight tournament. Listen, I covered the World Boxing Super Sixes, classic Super Sixes in 2010 to 2012 or 2009, 2011. It really made Mikkel Kessler, Carl Froch and Andre Ward at the time. Look where they went on to go and do. There's 3 divisions in the world where we know who the champion is and everybody knows. In featherweight, super featherweight, everyone knows it's Vasyl Lomachenko. In middleweight, everyone knows it's Gennady Golovkin. Billy Joe Saunders may argue with me over that, but I think everybody would say it's Gennady Golovkin. And at light welterweight, it's Terence Crawford. Errol Spence is trying to prove that at welterweight right now. Every other division, there is a debate about who is the Ring Magazine #1, who is the right fighter in the division to be called the #1. These tournaments, yes, there might be one stray because of politics and television deals, but by the end of the tournament, you know who the #1 in the world is. And 40 years ago, most people that covered sport in our hemispheres or followed sport in our hemispheres knew who the world champion was in every weight division. And if we did have these tournaments, Ger, there is, like you say, the right amount of money on the table. You know who you're fighting over a year, so you've got 4-month camps apart. And we are going to create stars. And boxers at the top of every weight division should be a star. We've got people who are 7, 8, 9 ranked in the world who call themselves a world champion at the moment. It's because they own a portion of the world title belt. That's what's wrong with boxing in many ways. In answer to the UFC question, they are realizing why boxing has kind of evolved and developed like it has over 150 years as a professional sport, because the UFC stars are burning out very quickly. You know, I mean, I could talk to you for an hour and a half now if you want to go into the next, 90 minutes talking about Conor McGregor. It's so kind of convoluted and complex. But yeah, the tournament, look, whenever you can get a unification, it's great in boxing. Any tournament getting together, say, if 5 of the 8 of them are in the top 7 or 8 or 9 in the world in one of these tournaments, you are onto a winner. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, speaking of unification, and that's why I was passing it out to Ger, was just to get one last question in on Katie Taylor, because obviously her next fight has been announced in the last 24 hours or so. Victoria Bustos in New York in April. We don't know a lot about Bustos. I'm not sure if you do, Gareth, but she's one of a coterie of fighters, I understand, in South America who have kept very much to themselves up until this point. So this unification bout is not only huge for Katie Taylor, it's huge for the face of women's boxing.
Yeah, listen, whenever Katie Taylor is in my vicinity, I'm just swooning. No, I am. I've loved her since I first met her back in, God, when was it? 2007, 8 with Peter, and went down to Bray to see them, spent the day with them in Bray. And she's a wonderful woman. She entrances me. She is $1 Million Baby. She basically is $1 Million Baby. And look, the women's boxing has a big following in Central and South America. They actually get big numbers to events. Like Nicola Adams, the flyweight, is at a great advantage now that she's come into the pro game, because some of the female flyweights get crowds of 20,000 going to watch them in Mexico. And I think for Katie, her style is so exciting. There's an enigmatic quality about her as well. The modesty, I have to do this when she's speaking just to hear what she's saying. Have you had her in the studio?
Yeah.
Well, you know what she has an extraordinarily attractive charisma. She's a beautiful human being. I mean, and yet when she steps in the ring, she's like some kind of a raging bull. And those qualities are extraordinary. I think this is an amazing time for women's boxing. I've said it on your show before. If she turned pro in 2012 after winning Olympic gold in London, she could have fought Minnie Mouse at Croke Park and sold it out 3 times. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she should be headlining arenas in Ireland and building a following to take them to America. That's my view of what should be happening.
Gareth, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Absolute pleasure, gents.
You can follow Gareth on Twitter at Gareth A Davies DT, and of course you can read his work in the Telegraph as well. It always feels like there's an agenda against Eubank Jr, but I guess it's explained by the fact that he predicts that he's going to end careers, and so that causes people to go, no, hang on a second.
No, you're not.
Hang on a second.
The only career you're going to be ending is your own, mate. Well, according to Prince Naseem, that'd be the case.
Yeah, that was weird.
Very strange. It was strange even just seeing him, as Gareth said, in a suit in the punditry chair. I'm not sure, does he do a lot with ITV? I can't say I've watched a lot of boxing on ITV. I'd say the last time I watched boxing on ITV was Carl Frampton a few years ago in that free-to-air fight.
Oh, yeah.
But they haven't had a lot of boxing since, so I'm not sure, has he popped up in other places? But he certainly has made a name for himself as a pundit by that outrageous remark, which it is outrageous to suggest that he should retire after...
He's 28, he's not going to retire.
He's not going to retire. It's a nice enough payday, and he was completely kind of outskilled by a superior opponent, but I don't think the opponent was that superior to him, if you know what I mean, as in the ceiling that Chris Eubank Jr. can get to isn't that far away from where George Groves is at.